All right, guys, we got
Shaves.
Michael early here. Go ahead and we'll just open it straight to questions. Use the raise hand function. Jesse.
So a conference team, but not a conference series. Just what do you make of that?
It's the world we live in now, ain't it? It's obviously different. I kind of like it because you only got to do the report, one big report, then make adjustments and have a chance to make adjustments before you play them in conference. But yeah, definitely different, but familiar with Utah and, excited to play them.
Jacob.
Hey, Mike, hope you've been well.
Same.
You guys in the last couple games have really come on offensively, and like Tracy was saying, it was a slow start, but then to kind of get the success that you've had over the course of the last 3 games, what kind of went into that, and what's the approach when guys are struggling to kind of break them out of it and not rush anybody back into pushing too hard?
Staying the same, staying the course, staying with what we do day to day. You make little adjustments here and there, but we've seen these guys, we know what they are. So we didn't change much. I mean, we did some mindset stuff, some preparation stuff like that, approach wise, but as far as our day-to-day work, it's the hardest thing to do is not to change and stick with your, convictions. But that's what we did. And that's what we do. And there's no panic. And when you start changing a bunch of stuff, when the players think you're panicked, which I never have been, never will be, then they start to panic. So it's just making small adjustments with certain guys, and you always do that. But the day-to-day function and everything you do can't drastically change. And we'll continue to stay the course. And we got this is young guys need that. Young guys need consistency in what we do every day, and that's what we've done. And they know what to expect when they come in here. So just because a few at bats don't go their way or our way, scoring runs, like I said, you make those little adjustments, but the main stuff has to stay the same, and it has.
Jack.
Hey, Coach, it seems like if you guys are going to be successful this year, it's going to be on the backs of some freshmen. What specifically has impressed you with the young guys in the box, like Hunter Haas and Jack Moss?
They have no fear. There's never that initial butterflies, or at least they didn't show it. You know what I'm saying? They stepped in there ready to play. Those guys have been playing in big games their whole life, and that's why they're here. So I'm not shocked. I'm more impressed. You know what I'm saying? They've done a really good job, and very, very proud of how they've started off. And I mean, Hunter Haas is off to a great start, and Jack doesn't have all the hits to show for it, but he's had some great at bats, lined out a few times, and he'll be on his way too.
Hey, Mike, has it been a little bit unexpected for you just seeing the production you're getting from that bottom of the order? Because a guy like Lampy, who's hitting in the 9th spot, leading the team right now in RBI, just like how big is that when you can get runners on and drive in those runners sort of late in the order?
It's been great. I mean, yeah, obviously that's a surprise. I mean, not as big a surprise as the lack of production we've kind of got in the middle thus far. So those guys, they've picked up the slack, and that's great. And obviously if they can continue that all year and in the middle picks it up, we find that right combination, we got something good. But having a guy like Joe Lampy in the 9 hole is great. Just the speed factor, competitiveness, when you flip the order, it kind of gives you that old saying that, second leadoff hitter. Him in the 9 hole is pretty dynamic spot for him to be in, and he's produced and done his job the way he's supposed to. So he's been great until the last game. He had runners on third, less than 2 outs 3 times. He was 1 for 3 cashing them in. Coming into that game, he was 4 for 4 cashing the runner in with 3 hits. So he's done his job, and he works really hard. And yes, it's great to have a guy like that and the bottom of the order to produce, especially when those guys at the 1-2 are producing and be on base for them.
Jeff.
Do you feel now going into this, I guess, 3rd full week that you've kind of found your offensive identity?
Yeah. I mean, I think we always knew what it was. I don't think we quite know exactly who everyone is yet. But yeah, like we said all along, the power it's there. It's just not as much. It's not as consistent power. We got guys who can pop it out. Every guy can hit one out of the park. It's just the consistency of doing it. But yeah, guys just giving those grinder at bats, getting guys moved over, running the bases really, really well, like really well, taking extra bases on guys when they make mistakes. So yeah, I think we're coming into our own with it a little bit. I think we still need a little more time. Obviously yesterday or whenever it was, Nevada game was great for us. Guys getting some hits and kind of busting through there. So yeah, I think we're coming into it. Not quite there yet, but this would be a big weekend for us to kind of see every nerve you had should be gone at this point. Guys should be getting a little more comfortable, and I think we should, see what we got a little more this weekend. I think we'll be able to answer that question better after these next 3 games.
Jacob.
I think it was in the 6th inning of the first game on Saturday where you guys had a sequence of at bats where there was, I think Kai reached on an error and then he was bunted over and eventually he scored on a sac fly. Is that kind of a mindset of just the situational hitting and the awareness to be able to do things like that? Is that hard to get young players in that mindset? Because I know that the game as a whole kind of moves away from that right now and it preaches like the big fly technique and just to kind of scoop the ball and hit it out as hard as you can. Is it hard to get younger players in that mindset? What's kind of the approach with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach is you try to teach every guy who they are. And if you try to be if you're Kai, for instance, who does have a homer, another one off the wall, but if Kai Murphy thought he'd go out and hit a bunch of homers, he'd hit none. But if Kai Murphy hits like a hitter, sprays the ball around, he'll hit more, actually will hit for more power just being himself. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge. I mean, every kid who comes in here now wants to be the next Torque. I mean, that's just what it is. That's just the truth. And great. I'd love to have another one, but the reason he was so good and the reason why some of these guys are so good, if you just try to be yourself, who you are as a hitter, you'll maximize your potential. So yes, it is difficult. Especially with new guys, like when you get them in here for year 2, or just look how far Drew Swift has come and that process. So yeah, but you got to speed up that learning curve when you got freshmen in there, but we got some mature guys who have really bought in, and the success we've had in the past helps with that buy-in, especially when you got some of the older guys back here. But not an easy task, but that's really what kind of my job is supposed to be about. You got to make guys better, but the best way to make them better is to help them find who they are as a hitter, to maximize your strengths. And I think that's how you be productive.
Jesse.
So you said you liked Lampy in the 9 spot, but would you ever, like to see him higher up in the order maybe if he continues, hitting like this?
Oh, I mean, yeah, obviously if he continues and on, he'll move up. Absolutely. I mean, not my call ultimately in the end, but I think that's kind of how it works. I think we've been really good up top, really good on the back end. He's not a middle of the order type of guy, so he wouldn't slide there. I think it's part of personnel a little bit on that end. Like 1, 2, I think we're doing a pretty good job, and that's the style of hitter he is. So putting him in that spot just kind of fits what the team needs more than, it's not really what he's not doing. It's just what we got personnel wise and what they're doing just fits a little better at the top for us.
Michael.
I guess to kind of go off that more than a general landscape, if the guys at the bottom of the line continue to produce like they have been, do you think the guys that currently sit in the 3, 4, 5 spots could move down in the lineup to maybe see if they can get better pitches and try and get them going at the plate, in terms of instead of having them stay in the middle of the order all year long and kind of keeping that same lineup day in and day out?
Well, I think you've seen, and what Skip's done is we've had, usually don't see it a lot, but we've had kind of a little bit of a revolving middle, trying to find those guys. And it comes down to too, like, I mean, what have these guys had? What's 20, 30 some at bats, something, not a lot. Well, we've seen, with Nate and with Aubrey and Jack, some of these guys in the middle, we've seen over 100 in the spring and fall. So we're not necessarily ready to judge them off of, 7 games. Like, we have more history. We have the luxury of having more history and seeing more practice out of them. But I mean, obviously, if things stay the same, Skip will definitely make some changes that are necessary. But right now, those guys they're kind of in a little bit of a funk. And I think Nate to me is good to go. Aubrey is getting close. And I think Ethan Long, very, very productive the other day in the 4-hole. So I think we're good right now. No need to make anything too drastic at this point. Just because I think we trust those guys and we know what they can do and show confidence in them.
Alex?
Now you mentioned it, Aubrey Major, kind of struggling a little bit. Obviously, he's an Indiana guy, so many Indiana connections on this coaching staff. How can you use, maybe that similar past and, where you guys grew up to use with him to make sure he stays confident and gets out of the slump?
Well, he's not an Irish football fan like us, Alex, so I can't break the ice with him.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're my 2 team behind the Devils, just to clarify. So yeah, that started early on. We've got a good relationship and connection. He went to North Central. I went to Anderson. There's a little bit of a basketball rivalry there when I was a kid. So all that's been established. So yeah, he's gonna be fine. He just, he's just in a little bit of a funk, but he's found some ways to get some hits. And like I said, going back to the history part of it, we know what he can do. We've seen his college numbers before, plus we've seen him in the fall. So it's just about, all it takes is one to fall. That's all it really takes. He needs a bleeder or something to run into one, and he's going to be just fine. So not ready to do anything too drastic with him yet, but like to see him get going sometime here soon, because he has the ability to be pretty impactful from what we've seen in practice.
Jeff?
You mentioned Long. How do you see his role mixed in between his opportunity to hit with pitching and then Brian Kalmer? What have you seen out of him so far?
Ethan, I know Skip has a challenge with that just because he's so important to us on the mound. We got to make sure he stays healthy and fresh and keeps his legs underneath him. But you saw it the other day. That kid's a baseball player. He can go out and go 2 for 4 with a sac fly and then come in and pitch pretty well. But it's just balancing the workload of a freshman. And then as far as Brian's done great in what his role is thus far. I think off the bench, he has got 2 walks, a hard line out, a sac fly. And then when he started the other day, he was 1 for 4 and had a double with 2 RBIs. So one thing about Brian is I could yell at him right now and say, hey, go get in the batter's box, and he'd be ready to hit. So he's definitely a professional when he steps in there. He has like a knack to be a good pinch hitter. Like there's just some guys who can do that. And with Brian, it's like he's ready to go at all times. And obviously if he keeps getting in there and producing in that role, could possibly lead to some other things. But both those guys are doing their jobs for what we need them to do right now, and they're doing them pretty well.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we got Skip here. Skip, you can go ahead and open things up.
I'll let you guys fire away with questions.
Jesse.
Hey Skip, do you have any update on Cooper Benson's injury?
Yeah, so what we thought, now that we have more information on things, what we wanted to do was to go ahead and release both Boyd and Cooper are going to be undergoing season-ending surgery, Tommy John surgery, both of them. And, the point that I want to make with that is, I obviously we feel badly for the kids. They're great kids, tremendous workers, have put a lot of time in. Everybody's uniquely different. But from a standpoint, nobody feels worse for those guys than certainly, we do and their families. And Jason Kelly has a tremendous track record. So I think that the tendency sometimes in situations like this is you point, there's always the point blame. I still, I feel confident. I've got the best pitching coach in the country who's as conservative and good with these with young pitchers as there is in the business. I think prior to this announcement right now. I think he's had one Tommy John surgery in the last 8 years. So these things happen. It's unfortunate for the kid. It's unfortunate for our program. And, but our plan right now is we're going to get this stuff taken care of. And both of these guys, the plan, at least at this point, is that both of them will be rejoining the team next year. So unfortunate timing, just one of those things. So, but that's what we know to date.
Jacob.
Tracy, to have such a tremendous loss with two pitchers who are very clearly important to your program, how do you kind of go about motivating everybody to kind of step up and get into a position where you're going to have guys fill in roles and everybody has to be in a position where these two guys are no longer able to help basically, and they have to step up?
Well, I mean, we thought coming into the year and still think that way, that one of the strengths of this team was certainly is the pitching piece of it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it for you and say we're going to be the same. You could use 100 sports analogies on what that loss means, of whether it's your 1 and 2 quarterback in football or your top 2 leading scorers in baseball. But when you lose your number 1 and number 2 pitcher after the first 2 weekends, that shakes some things up and makes you different. Now, all of that said, we have very capable individuals in that bullpen, and the expectation, and it has always been, the expectation is you got to prepare to play the next guy. So we got to get guys to step up, which they're capable of doing. If you recall, we've kind of had the similar situation on the offensive side with Connor Davis. And when he went down with 3 days left in the fall, that afforded some opportunities, quite frankly, to guys that probably wouldn't have played much this year. So the same could be said for what's going to happen in the pitching staff. The thing that we have to figure out, and just from a tactical standpoint, is we felt very good about if we could get it to a 6-inning game, and then the quality of what we were going to bring out of the bullpen to get to the 9th was, in my opinion, I've been doing this a long time, was probably as good as there was in the country. Now, all that does now, when you eliminate those, probably 12 to 14 innings a weekend, it just bumps everybody up. And you're not just dealing with 1, you're dealing with 2. So now everybody moves up 2 spots of what their role should be. But again, all of that said, we've got some quality arms that have not pitched over the first couple weekends that are now going to get their opportunity to pitch. And we feel like, we feel like we're as good a shape as we've been, at least since I've been here, to cover. You're never going to replace those guys, but to cover some of those innings that we lost in 2 of arguably, some of the best starters in the conference.
Yeah.
So a couple things. Did these injuries, were these more wear and tear type injuries, or do you think did it happen in their last appearances, or do you even know?
Well, and I've talked to both the individuals, and and you guys know there's things that we can share and not share. But what I would say, and both are comfortable, are like, look, there's nothing to hide. We've been dealing with some of the stuff. Boyd's been had a little bit of a history of this, and then it was not one pitch. And so I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't want to speculate on, but at least the early indications are, and I shouldn't say early, at least the indications, at least that I've heard, is that these are wear and tear injuries. It's not a certain pitch. It's not a training technique. It's just these things happen. And there's plenty of data out there, on the internet, I guess you could look at and look up. As I don't want to say overuse, but when we're saying, we're not talking about just in college. We're talking about a lot of these kids, and not just the 2 individuals, Boyd and Cooper, we're talking about, but pitchers in general, arm care, and we really can't get involved in that or have a lot of say in that until they get to us. So I don't want to sit here and place blame or cast blame. It's just an unfortunate injury for both of them that happened. But I would say that it wasn't one pitch. It wasn't something done in training here. It was just ultimately bad luck, and we just have to deal with it.
And then I was going to ask you about Fall. Does this specifically Fall, does this put him into the starting rotation?
I think our plan at this point, is because we got, like I said, we got some capable guys. His role, as you know, coming at least early in the season was kind of those middle to late leverage innings. So I think our thought is to not necessarily do away with that role, but, bump Thornton to Friday, go Tolman on Saturday, and every game's important, which is our mindset, as always been. So probably leave Justin available game 1 and 2, and maybe make not maybe, but our plan is probably do game 3 TBA. So just so we're not disrupting everything at this point, and kind of let that evolve, because we're going to have to find a couple guys that are going to have to step up and do that. So that's going to take a little bit of time and trying some guys in some different roles. So while I'd say I'm very comfortable with starting Justin Fall on Sunday, but if we need him to win a game on Friday or Saturday at the back end of the bullpen, then we're going to use him to win the game, and then that will adjust what we do on Sunday.
Jacob.
And just to follow up on that, and just so we're clear, is it the intention to kind of try guys out for the time being and then eventually settle into somebody? Have you planned that far, or is it really just PBA from here on out?
Well, I mean, there's been some guys that just because of circumstances of the games, that we haven't gotten in yet, but they've been performing well in practice, and maybe their role wasn't, a one coming in the game in a 1-run situation in the middle innings with a lead. Their role may be that you're going to get the ball when we're behind or we need a hold. Well, now those things change. So we don't have the luxury. So there's probably a little bit of both. You're going to see some of the guys in the same roles that you've seen up to this point, but just sheer innings and sheer numbers, you're going to have to find a couple other guys that will assume those roles. Because like I said, what happens is when you stack your staff and you plan it out over 9 innings, you plan out games with 9 innings with a lead, 9 innings with the big lead, small lead, all of those things will dictate who you throw. So we plan on, we're competitors, we plan on leading a lot. So now it just bumps everybody. It moves it up the food chain or down the food chain, however you're looking at it. So we need a little time to see what that looks like in real time on the game, because I've said this 1,000 times. It's one thing to do it in practice. We got to see, what happens when the lights are on. So the good part of the conversation is we feel like we have some options. The tough part of it is how do you replace a Cooper Benson when you look at his numbers, and Boyd, and while limited this year, certainly what he was arguably our best pitcher last year. So statistically, at least. So that it's a void, but it's not a void that we don't feel we can cover. So it's just going to take a little bit of time to figure out what pieces, will cover that loss or losses.
Alex.
You mentioned, not specifically to those two guys, but that before pitchers come to you, maybe there's some overuse in amateur ball. What can be changed at the amateur level to avoid that, the overuse before they even get to you, to where, we've seen a rise in Tommy John numbers in pro and in college?
Yeah, and you can imagine because of psychology, you feel for the kids that happened. And so, I'm always about perspective. And so what we try to do when this happens in a situation like this is show them exactly what you said is, hey, look at the propensity at which this happens, even in professional baseball, the success rate of these types of surgeries, all of those things. But in answering your question, I don't think there's an easy answer to that, because the dilemma that we're in as a college program, and commitments are coming earlier and earlier. So sometimes you're getting commitments on kids their freshman year in high school. What you can't do as a college, you can advise and work directly, with the family to give your suggestions and opinions as to the usage, but you can't be in the business of saying, to your commit who's a youngster, hey, you go to your high school coach or you go to your summer coach and you tell them you're not pitching because, you've got a bright future. We can't get in the business of doing it. I think that has to be more on the family side. So we try to monitor guys' usage. Honestly, when we commit them, we know what they're doing in the summer. And frankly, we've had some of those conversations with parents, and I'm not going to say specific parents, but those conversations have happened over time where we've said, hey, we've noticed here, you've pitched on X amount of days rest. That's not good for you. You might want to have a conversation with your coach to see, because you want the kids to be competitive. You want them to play for their high school teams and compete for them. Same thing on the summer thing. So it's always that constant balancing act. You've heard me talk before about specific pitch counts. I don't know if that's the answer either, because a guy may have 100 pitch limit, but yet most guys in high school are two-way players. And if they're doing tons of throwing in between, that pitch count's pretty irrelevant. So it's a hard task. It's something that, that we try to manage as best as possible. But in the case of these guys, it's sometimes you just can't help it. And I will reiterate what I've said before, because I know what happens in things like this. People take shots at you and say, well, they did this. And, it's not I've got the best pitching coach in the country and who has an unbelievable track record. I think we checked, because I knew this question and I was going to give you the release anyway. But I think, I asked JK, and this was even in the interview process, because arm care is very important. I think he's had one Tommy John in 8 seasons at Washington. So he's got a real good track record. He takes care of these guys. This is just unfortunate bad luck for both of them.
Jack.
Yeah, Coach, on Tuesday, you kind of staffed it. I think you used 6 or 7 pitchers. Can we expect to see a lot more of that, games where you roll out the entire bullpen, especially in midweek contests?
Well, maybe, particularly maybe as we're trying to find that depth piece, and looking at your team. But at the same time, I've got to believe, hopefully relatively soon, that those roles are going to happen where we're going to get it down to 8 to 10 like we were before. But if we have to go matchups, because that's what the situation calls for, then we feel like we've got some guys, and we have multiple guys that we could do the matchup stuff. But I really can't answer that. I can't answer that right now. In a perfect world, you like your starter to get at least 5 and then kind of go from there. But I don't see that changing moving forward midweek or weekend.
Michael.
I apologize if you said this already, but do you know when and where the surgeries will be for both guys?
We're going to do them obviously as soon as possible, because the calendar on that. But no, I don't have that information at this time.
Garrett.
Hey Tracy, what are some of the things that you've seen just from Utah, and just sort of the things that stand out to them approaching this series tomorrow?
Well, a little bit of a slow start with them, but they're very capable program, very capable players. The Pac-12, and I've said that ever since I've been in this league. It's a very unforgiving league, and while this isn't a conference series, it's still a Pac-12 opponent, and we're approaching this thing accordingly. But like always, I'm more probably focused on what we're doing in our dugout. But if it's a Bill Kinneberg team that we played for the last umpteen years, they'll be ready to play. They'll have some good arms, some quality arms, guys that can shut you down at any time, and then they're going to play good sound baseball. So but I go back to, I'm more concerned about what we're doing at this point in the year and making sure our stuff is right as opposed to the other. So,
Jesse.
Coach, 2 questions actually. So first off, just how weird is it to play a conference opponent in a non-conference game? And then second off, do you think that pitchers might be throwing curveballs too early these days, or there's just, while summer baseball is important, there's just too much playing over the course of a year?
So the first part of your question about weird play. Well, everything is weird this year, so, what difference does it make on playing a conference opponent? So I'd say it's just one more weird thing for the year. But no, we're looking at it honestly. And when Bill and I had talked to Bill Kinneberg, the head coach of Utah, we talked about setting this particular weekend up. It was literally in the midst of the cancellations of multiple weekends. Everybody's schedule was getting all jacked up, and we were, I believe, supposed to be in the same tournament together in a Big Ten Pac-12 challenge. And we were kind of like, rather than go through the the hassle of trying to find another opponent. We know our protocols are the same. Why don't we just go ahead and play each other, because we're going to want baseball games during the season. So that's kind of how it happened. And to me, baseball is baseball. So we're excited to be playing these games. Second part of your question, what was that?
Yeah, do you think that
The
players
curveball.
might be playing too much throughout a year, or throwing curveballs maybe a little too early?
Well, that's been the age-old argument. The improper technique of a curveball is going to get you. But let's face it. I mean, pitching, and there is a high propensity. Again, someone cited it on this Zoom thing already. A lot of guys are getting it. I mean, a lot of guys are getting it at the major league level. It is a very unnatural motion to pitch and to throw a baseball. And when you look at the force and the stress that's on that particular joint, yeah, over time, and I would say again, I mean, without divulging too much, the early indications to us as a staff were, this isn't something that just happened on a one pitch thing or recently. The images would reveal that these have been a chronic I don't want to say overuse. It's like these guys are pitchers. They've been good pitchers their entire career. They've pitched a lot. And when you put high stress on an arm over an extended period of time, these types of things happen. But from a technique standpoint, I didn't see Boyd as a youth. I didn't see Cooper, as a little leaguer. So I can't really comment on the improper and how many breaking pitches and things like that. But you try to minimize that stuff. And, and this is not one of the fears, but one of the things that I think all college coaches were very concerned about, and even coming back on the COVID, because guys didn't pitch. Sometimes not pitching or not playing has an adverse effect on the body as well when you crank it up. But I just think this is, I would say honestly, bad luck. It's unfortunate because we've had the luxury of being able to train and pretty much stay in our regular training routine outside of the summer ball. And for us, what we do is we will look at our guys that throw for us during the year and decide whether or not we're going to send them out. So in other words, if guys had a lot of innings, even if they were supposed to go play in the Cape, we won't let them go play in the Cape because we're very mindful of the stress and the load on our pitchers. So I think we do as good a job as anybody on that.
Jeff.
Can you give us an indication of how these two guys have reacted to having to go through this? And then also, are there specific guys that you think might get more opportunity now that weren't necessarily getting it before these injuries?
Well, the immediate, I think you could imagine the immediate disappointment. Overwhelming disappointment, because they've worked, the two guys we're talking about, Boyd and Cooper, have worked extremely hard. And they're probably different in both their scenarios, where Boyd has been honestly battling a lot of this since high school, and it just finally happened. And I think his mindset was maybe a little bit different, because maybe in the back of his mind, he's known that he's, had some issues in the past, whereas Cooper, it was kind of a shock. It just happened. But disappointment. But where they are now is, I think they're like, okay, it is what it is. You've heard me say on these things a lot, we're big about perspective. I know it's hard sometimes for a 20-year-old, 21-year-old kid to realize, and they think their career's over. But being a former pitcher myself, I've had to have surgery, and I'm 55 now, and I've told both of them, I'm like, you know what, dude, I don't even remember that time back in college. So I know it seems like the most significant event in your life, which it is probably up to this point, but it's only a speed bump. And both of these guys have healthy mindsets. They're just ready to fix it and get on the mend and get a target to when they can come back. And so we're looking at that. We're like, hey, we're going to involve these guys as much as possible. They're on the charge. Boyd is still running the bullpen and coaching and involved, because these guys are key. We're going to miss them competitively, but they're also key when they're not pitching, because guys look up to them on the staff. So their heads are as good as they can be right now, given the fact that you get your season taken away from you last year, you're excited, and all of a sudden it's over for you again. But in the grand scheme of life, this isn't the worst thing that's ever going to happen to them in their life. I think all of us, and particularly that you there, Jeff, you know, as an older, wiser man on this call, there's a lot left in life that has to throw at you than this.
Michael,
I know you obviously want to win every game that you guys play, but with you guys playing Utah and Salt Lake later in the season, is there any thought to perhaps delay any sort of strategic method towards this weekend for when you play them in conference play? And is this also a weekend where you kind of do a little bit of scouting as well for that series?
I don't know. No, I don't really subscribe to that because baseball's, you know, it usually comes down to 3 or 4 situations during the game where one team executes better than the other. Baseball's been around for a really, really long time. I've said 1,000 times, you know, I mean, you know, managing, yes, you can have an influence, but the game kind of tells you what you're supposed to do. You know, the game will call for certain things in certain situations, and it just simply comes down to execution. So for us to have some secret, you know, play or something like that we don't want, that doesn't really factor in for us. And I think I mentioned this on the last call or one of the last interviews I did. The amount of video and scouting services and programs that you can get now, even at the college level, there aren't too many secrets anymore anyway. So we could not play Utah this weekend, and I think we'd still have the same information and vice versa to when we play them in the conference series. So our whole mindset is we're going to this to win a contest, win a baseball game, regardless of who the opponent is.
last couple of questions, Alex.
First Power 5 opponent coming up this week, and then you have Cal State Fullerton, and then it's the bulk of that Pac-12 schedule. How can you use this weekend to get ready for Fullerton and then the Pac-12?
Well, I mean, you know, when we're looking at the Pac-12, like we're certainly looking at it, you know, you want to be ready by the Pac-12 because that's the conference you're playing in. But in terms of quality of opponent, we don't look at it. And I think that's the part that gets lost a little bit in even the knowledge of people that aren't intimately tied into college baseball anymore. There's a lot of parity. I don't know if you guys saw that. I mean, you've seen what top 5 teams have done over the first couple weekends and lots of upsets. And you could argue that they're not even really upsets anymore with the right pitcher on the mound. So we feel like even the opponents that we've played up to this point in Sac State, I thought they had at least 2 legitimate Pac-12 starters. Great test for us. Last weekend, the same thing. They're Friday guys, you know, as good as any pitcher in the country as well. So this weekend, we expect nothing different. You know, I know it says Pac-12 on their affiliation of conference, but we're just looking at it as a quality opponent to learn more about our young team. And now, you know, kind of figure out our pitching. That's what we're going to this. But first and foremost, we want to win. We want to win. And we just don't, and I apologize if I'm steering away from the theme of your article, but we don't look at it as like, you know, Pac-12 versus whatever. Everybody's good. And you get west of the Mississippi, there are no mid-majors. You know, I'm coming out of an 18 years in a different location when, you know, you play a smaller school or whatever there, it's a little different than out here. I think the quality of baseball is really good, you know, even when you get outside the Pac-12. So another quality opponent, going to be followed up by another quality opponent in Fullerton, but we're just taking one game at a time.
Jacob.
Tracy, this is kind of a 2-part question for you. First, have you ever had a moment in your career where you lost 2 critical pitchers this early in the season before?
I can kind of, I don't know, 2. I remember, you know, I remember what was it, year 2013, we lost the Big Ten preseason Big Ten pitcher of the year in the off season. And then I remember at Miami of Ohio, we lost one of, you know, it ended up being a 2nd or 3rd round pick caliber pitcher. We lost him in the offseason as well. I wouldn't say 2, but to lose your number 1 and number 2 in the first week of the season, I would say this is a career first. But, you know, our mindset has been all along, we told the guys, hey, man, this year with COVID and everything we've had to deal with, it's going to be an interesting year. So we will be prepared to play whomever, whenever, and under any sort of circumstances. and that includes injury. So while I feel terribly for those guys, and I feel terribly because they've worked hard and they've already sacrificed, last year. But we can't sit and dwell on, and they're great, they get it. We can't sit and dwell on that. Like, okay, it's over, it's done. We know what it is. Let's fix it. Let's move the needle towards you guys healing and getting back with us next year. But our task at hand right now is Utah tomorrow night, period. That's it. We're not going to sit and lament and feel sorry for ourselves because there's no time for that. It doesn't do you any good. So, and these guys would tell you the same thing. So.
Last two questions, Jack.
Yeah, Coach. I'm wondering if you know if either of those guys have done work with weighted balls and any sort of driveline stuff, and if you use that in your program. If not, what are your thoughts on the popularization of that kind of training?
I'd let JK speak more specifically to the day-to-day, training on that. But I would say in general terms, our philosophy and development is everybody's different. Everybody has their own set. So in other words, we've had, some pitchers that have, extensive background in the drive line. We've had some that don't, but I know JK has his own philosophy on particular things. But we don't have a cookie cutter approach on that. And I would hesitate at this time to comment on those, Boyd and Cooper's specific training mechanisms, because I'm not with them as intimately every day as JK. So, but here's the deal. I mean, guys are getting Tommy John that do drive line, and guys are getting Tommy John that don't do drive line. So I don't know that there is a rhyme or reason to it other than what I said before. Throwing a baseball is a very unnatural motion. And you've seen some of the greatest pitchers, mechanically sound pitchers at the major league level are getting Tommy John. So it's an unfortunate injury. It's unfortunate that we're seeing it more and more, because I do think the velocities are going up. And which I'm not a physicist, but I would say that if you're throwing harder, that means there's probably a lot more force and stress. So that's probably why we're seeing more of these injuries, is just because, the athletes are getting bigger and stronger. And I mean, that's all I got. I mean, it's just kind of like I said, it's a random misfortune.
Garrett.
Tracy, a lot of fans understandably upset that they can't be out at Phoenix Muni in person, given that they're seeing spring training and they're having limited attendance, and as well as other conferences like the SEC. Have you heard anything at all, maybe just about an update with that policy in the Pac-12? And are you hopeful at all that there will be fans at some point this season?
How about I'll answer it like this? I'll just say, how about just be just a little bit more patient with this? I think good things are coming. So let's just put it like that.
Sounds good.
So I'm optimistic. I mean, I think anybody, if you're looking at what's going on around the country, and I've said this, even before, our athletic director, Ray Anderson, within the conference regulations and rules, within the rules of the county and the state, all of those things, wants to be very aggressive. I mean, it is his intention within the parameters that he has to deal with outside of us. I mean, we catch all the negative emails and, hey, it's not us. And quite frankly, it's not Ray Anderson. It's the conference has mandates. The county has mandates. The state has mandates. So you have to get through all of those. But as you indicated, there are positive signs within our state. So I would say I'm very optimistic that what you were asking for and wanting is going to happen.
Thanks, Skip. All right, guys, we got Boyd here. Just go ahead and open it up to questions. Is anybody there? There you go. Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Boyd, just how are you handling the news right now about, you and Cooper about to undergo surgery?
A little bit of a shock in the beginning. I got an MRI. Thought I was going to be out for a couple weeks, come back this season and compete. Obviously, that didn't happen. But I'm in a better state now. I think me and Cooper, we're feeding off of each other and helping each other out and stuff. And it is what it is. So at the end of the day, I'm not done with baseball, and come back next year and compete.
Alex.
Hey, Boyd, when did you start to realize that something was wrong?
Just coming back from winter break, just didn't feel right. I know me and JK were talking, trying to get something solved with some pre-throwing, or maybe not throwing as far, long toss wise and stuff. And it got a little bit better, but once I got on the mound, it wasn't clicking right. So that's when Jesse decided to get the stress MRI.
Yeah.
You've had some injury situations in the past. Was there ever any indication that you might be headed this direction at some point?
Well, it is a game of baseball, and throwing is it's not good for you. So I knew eventually, if I continued baseball, that this probably would happen, just like most guys. So no, I didn't think it was going to happen now. I thought maybe, later in my career, maybe it would happen, but like I said, it is what it is. And I'm just glad we got news, and we got it figured out, and I'm ready to move forward.
Alex.
You mentioned you didn't feel right when you got on the bump in the opening series. What exactly were you feeling when you're out there?
I was kind of just trying to grind through it, just trying to get, that inning through. Just didn't feel good. Just couldn't get to extension. Just a lot of elbow pain. I thought that, maybe I could grind through the season with a little bit of discomfort. But it was so much pain that I just couldn't compete effectively and help the team out.
Jacob.
Boyd, I'm curious emotionally what this did to you when you realized like this was probably what was going to happen, because I know before the season when we spoke, you were talking about just how confident you were that this was kind of the year for you. So I'm curious what you go through when you get news like this and realize that this is the reality.
Yeah, it kind of sucked. I over quarantine, I kind of figured things out mechanically. My velo was up in the fall. I was excited for this year to, be one of the leaders of the pitching staff and, kind of help those younger kids out. Basically, through them seeing me what I do, and helping them, when I'm not pitching. But emotionally, when I first heard the news, it was pretty tough. But I had a lot of support from my teammates, from my parents, from the coaches. I didn't have anybody, making me feel bad about the situation. And everybody's just been super supportive. So I'm in a good mindset right now.
Ethan.
Yeah, answering the first question, you talked about Cooper Benson, you guys kind of having it at the same time. What role do you think both of you, and what impact do you think both of you will have on each other during your recovery, since it is at the same time?
Yeah, I'm getting surgery a week before. So he might be a week behind, but I've talked to some people that have had the surgery, and they say there's ups and downs. Some days you're just not going to emotionally feel right. You're going to think that, you're not progressing. I think those days are going to be the days that, if Coop is feeling good that day, he can help me. If I'm feeling real good that day and he's not, vice versa, I can help him.
Jacob.
This might be a little early to even ask about this, but has this kind of made you think about what your plans are for next year? Because I know that probably came into your mind at least a little bit.
Yeah. I this season I was excited to, show scouts what I had, and make that next step in baseball. But like I said, it is what it is, and I'm gonna come back at ASU and compete for a national championship once again. And I think Coop would say the same thing. So yeah, it kind of sucks. I want to be in pro ball eventually, but when the time comes, it'll come.
Jeff.
So you've been doing some leadership things with this staff, and you've seen them now. How do you think they're going to be able to absorb the loss of you two guys, and who do you think are going to be the people that need to pick it up now in the absence of you and Cooper?
That's a good question. I think that even though we're out physically, we can't compete. We can bring a lot of different things to the table. Like I said, I'm a leader, so I can still help the younger guys. You know, me and JK, I kind of have a little bit of like a coaching mentality now in practice, and in the bullpen, I'm the radio guy, so I make sure everybody's going to get ready. So yeah, I'm curious to see. I don't really have a set of guys that I would think that need to step up, because I think everybody's prepared. It's just a matter of time when they get their call that they make it happen.
Thanks, Blake.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, guys, we got Tyler Thornton here. Go ahead and raise your hands. Jesse.
Hey Tyler, you're the number one starter now, basically. Just what is that, or the Friday starter? What is that? You know, what do you think about that? And just how do you, do you feel for the guys that are, done for the year now?
Yeah, it's really sad when something like that happens to anyone, and it's going to be tough for our team this year. But we're just going to do everything we can to keep moving on and keep getting these wins. So yeah.
Garrett.
Hey Tyler, did you notice anything amongst just like Cooper and Boyd when you'd be, working out or throwing pens, just something wasn't right with both of them and leading up?
I mean, I thought it was just normal soreness, but I mean, I guess it was a little bit more than that. But yeah, it sucks, and we just got to keep moving past it.
Alex.
Hey, Tyler, what have their attitudes been like since they heard the news?
Well, obviously they're sad in the beginning, like anyone would. But I mean, right now they're doing everything they can to keep it moving and get back to being better. So yeah.
Jesse.
So, you move into this Friday night starter role. Just what about how prepared are you for that role?
Well, I'm just going to treat it like every other start. The day doesn't really make a difference for me. Just going to treat it like every other normal game. So yeah.
Jeff.
The pitching is, one of the real strengths of this team, and, you've lost some of the depth now, but from what you've seen of the staff, how do you feel like it can move forward beyond these two injuries?
I feel like we have one of the best pitching staffs in the country here at ASU, and I feel like we have multiple guys that could step up into that role. So I think we'll be fine.
Anybody else?
Okay, thank you.
All right, got Eric Tolman here now. Questions? Garrett.
Hey Eric, how are you guys just as a pitching staff and just as a team kind of coping with the news about Cooper and Boyd being out for the year?
It's unfortunate, but in the game of baseball, injuries happen, and you're gonna have to find a way to move forward. And a lot of guys will step up, and hopefully that they can take their spot and do just as good as they did. So we're gonna be all right.
Garrett.
Did you notice anything at all with like Cooper and Boyd, like when you guys would work out and in practice or whatever, just that something wasn't really right?
I mean, like they would say they're a little sore, but like we all thought it was just nothing serious. I mean, because like at life as a pitcher, you're always going to be hurting or sore. But when we got the news that it was more than just soreness and it was actually like real injuries, we were like, wow, that's that's unfortunate. But they're going to come back stronger next year, and they're going to be better.
Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah. Now that you're bumped up into that Saturday spot, I mean, how does that just change the mindset at all with you and Tyler now having to basically pitch just a day earlier? Does that change anything at all?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I think Skip and JK have pretty much put in our brains that it doesn't matter when we pitch, and we should always be prepared, and we should always pitch 100%, 110%. And on Saturday, I'm just going to go out there and pitch how I would every other day.
Alex.
Hey, Eric, who have been some of the younger guys who have impressed you that you think might be in line for potentially a role increase now?
I thought about Bryce Barnett. He's always been a pitcher who's been pretty dominant with his fastball and slider, and I think he has a changeup that's pretty good. So maybe he could be one of the guys that steps up and helps us win.
Garrett.
What do you know? Do you know anything at all about just Utah and kind of their hitters and how you guys might approach them this weekend?
I mean, in the past, I know how they play just because I played them a few times, and I haven't looked at any scouting report against hitters yet, but I know they are a pretty good team who are scrappy hitters who will get on base and will run and steal. So I'll have that in the back of my mind.
Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
What kind of message is Jason given to the pitching staff about going forward beyond these injuries?
Yeah, I mean, it's like what I said earlier. It's baseball, and stuff is going to happen. I mean, you look at the big leagues, high school, minor leagues. You see people all the time getting injured, and it's just the game. And unfortunately, it's the game we chose. So we're gonna just have to get our mind around it and just keep doing all our recovery stuff and getting healthier.
Garrett.
How as a pitching staff have you guys felt you guys done so far performance wise? Seemingly, of course, being one of the strengths of the team, but just so far serving this small sample size, how do you guys think you've done so far?
I think we've done great with all the situations that we have been put in. I think we've definitely minimized or done really well on the mound, including starters and relievers. And I think if we keep performing like this, we're going to be a very hard team to beat.
Anybody else? Cool. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, we got Cooper Benson here. Questions? Garrett, go ahead.
Yeah, hey Cooper, just how have you just been kind of coping with the news about you and Boyd being out for the rest of the year?
It's definitely been bummed. It sucks to hear, but I'm trying to look at it in a positive way and just continue to help out any way I can during the season with these guys and the younger guys, and just try and be a role model and just help them out whatever me and Boyd need to do. But looking forward to getting ready for rehab and attacking it so I can come back stronger next year.
Alex.
Hey, Cooper, have you had any injuries in the past? And then also, when did the discomfort really start to form?
I haven't had that many injuries in the past, maybe a couple tweaks in like my bicep and shoulder before, but just shows that never take anything for granted because it could be over just like that. I know Boyd's arms kind of hurt for longer than mine, so we're a little bit different in that case. So it just shows how you just need to be careful and know like what your body's telling you and when to stop. And I would say it started happening like in one of the last innings against Sac State, and then tried to come back the next week and just didn't feel right. So after that first inning, I knew something definitely wasn't right. So.
Jared.
Yeah, after going the one inning against Hawaii, was that just something like you knew like I can't continue to move on, or is that something that like maybe I could try to press on, but then the coaching staff kind of took you out as a precaution?
I took myself out. I know I didn't need to go anymore. I know it was early in the year, and there was a chance it could have just been a tweak of some sort. But yeah, the coaches were very supportive of me taking myself out. They know they wanted me to be all right, but yeah, just their support really helped out a lot.
Ethan.
You talk about support. What kind of part do you think you and Kooi Vander will both play on each other in terms of you both have that injury? Is there any part you'll play with each other while you go through that process?
Yeah, I mean, he's getting it a little bit before me, so he can tell me what to expect, and I can help him through and help him with anything he needs before. And I think having him next to me during this process is going to help out a lot as far as attacking rehab and throwing together when the time comes. So, and I know it's going to be different for both of us as far as how we feel on certain days, but it's definitely a blessing to have Boyd be with me through the process. Obviously, we didn't want this to happen, but for it to happen like this, I think it's going to help out both of us a lot.
Jeff.
First off, do you know what day you're going to have your surgery? And then who's been the people you've leaned on the most to help you, deal with this emotionally?
Yeah, I'm getting surgery on March 16th. And then just my parents have helped me out a lot with this, friends and family. Just like getting those like messages from them are obviously sad, but I appreciate all of the texts I get from friends and family. And then I had a good conversation with JK the other day, who helped me out a lot. And then obviously our trainer Jesse has been super supportive throughout this whole thing, helping me out with everything. So definitely my family, Jesse and JK, have really helped me out these past couple of days.
Jared.
Who is someone you think could maybe slide into that Sunday spot now that everybody's been moved up? I know the coaching staff has said they're not, they might wait and see and just kind of throw out some guys, but in your opinion, just who do you think could be a good candidate for that Sunday spot at least?
I'm not too sure right now. I know guys like Christian Bodovich and Jared Glenn are probably going to be the guys to get us through the sixth inning. I don't know if that's official, but I know that we're going to have to play that one weekend game a little different with a couple of us being down. So whatever JK decides to do or Skip decides to do, I think it'll be good. And we have plenty of depth in the bullpen to get through a good Sunday game. And so Sundays, you never know, it can happen either. So day games normally and the ball flies. So I think we'll be just fine, whoever throws on Sunday.
Anybody else? Cool. Thanks, Coop.
No problem.